G'day guys, it's Jay Ellis here, high performance lecturer, and today I'm joined by a very special guest. I'm very grateful for his time, but it's the Sydney Kings head coach, Will Weaver. Will, how are we, mate?
Yeah, great. So nice to talk to you, Jay.
Yeah, I really do appreciate it, and I know that you're a busy man, so I'm going to take 15 to 20 minutes of your time. We've got so much to talk about, but Will, you are very good at what you do, so I hear from people in the industry, so let's jump straight into it. Coaching, where did it all begin for you?
I love being parts of teams. And I think maybe even before then, if you ask my parents, I liked bossing people around on the playground. And so somewhere the confluence of those sources of joy, I think led me to a place where as I tried to map out what I wanted my life to look like, and I sort of laid out the priorities that were important to me, competing and getting energy from competing, doing something that I thought was a net positive or at least neutral for the world, and something where I felt like I could be a family man, those were the guiding principles for me. And so my experience as a part of teams and my love of the moments that that's provided me in my life is really what steered me to pursue this direction.
So Will, can we go back to your first coaching gig? How exactly did that come about? And were you 100% ready for that?
I was certainly ready because it's about as low stakes as you could imagine. I asked a mentor of mine after graduating high school what he thought I should do, and laid out to him some of my kind of principles I was chasing. And roughly in my head, I thought two wacky ideas, maybe like go to law school and get some sort of flexible degree that would allow me to go in a bunch of different directions, maybe nonprofit sector or government, or potentially get involved with sports somehow, be whatever that looked like. And I didn't have a great frame of reference for either one, frankly. And he said, well, I can't really help you with the first other than to tell you I don't know many happy lawyers. I don't really know any coaches, but I've coached I think it was 5th and 6th grade boys basketball team here at our school for the last 20 years. And if you want to come be my assistant, I'll pay you in hamburgers. And so a few, I guess, months into my freshman year of college, I was volunteering as his assistant coach for the 5th and 6th grade St. Andrews boys basketball team. And within about a week, I had stopped paying attention to anything related to my studies and was diagramming heinous, just reprehensible little plays in my notebook in the margins, getting ready for practice every day at 3 in the afternoon. So once I sort of was aware of how much energy I thought there might be some upside there for me if I continued on in the field.
So, Will, what I find interesting about that, and I do apologize just for a slight connection issue there, so hopefully you've still got me, but what I find interesting about that, Will, was what you said at the start, mentor. How important is mentors? And you've obviously now progressed in your coaching. You're slightly past the 5th and 6th grade there, but you obviously still have some mentors.
Yeah, I think it's the thing that I've cultivated with the most care outside of my family relationships. There's really not any turn in my life that I didn't benefit from the wisdom of one of the people that had a unique ability to frame things for me that I couldn't have framed for myself. And that is, I think, just universally true, that we all struggle for a bunch of reasons to combat the biases that are adaptive in one way or another, but aren't particularly so when you're dealing with career choices and life choices, the more complex kinds of decisions we all really wrestle with. And so the appreciation for the people that have spent time sharing their reflections on what they knew about me and maybe what they knew about the possible situations I was considering or trying to chase just grows as time goes on. And I think really is the kind of thing that makes me want to try and be that for others more so than almost any other career aspiration.
Yeah, well, I read something recently from somebody in the industry that said that for a young person, you're not necessarily lost, you're just early on in the process. And I think we kind of all go through that sometimes, where we do think we are a little bit lost. And it sounds like early on that it was a bit of a unknown territory for yourself. But you said that you dived straight into coaching, and before you knew it, you were lost all interest in your studies and you were focusing very much on the playbook. How quickly did you fall in love with coaching?
It was days, really. And I think that I've learned about myself in the intervening years that a potential weakness of mine is how broad my interests are and how broad the number of things are that excite me and fill me with curiosity. And so perhaps I was fortunate that I hit on something that I had some proclivity for, and that was a sweet spot in terms of our industry where somebody like me could even be considered at that late stage capable of progressing in the industry the way that I've been lucky enough to. But I think that the interactions I had that all of us have with music, with arts, with sports, with science, with language, like that's maybe the best part of the education system, is that it does give you at least some touch point with all those different areas. And I think that seeking out more opportunities to rub up against new categories of potential interest is almost like full stop the best lever in finding the thing that you're going to be passionate about.
Well, I absolutely love that you're interested in lots of different areas, and it's almost like you're putting many pieces of the puzzle together. But you mentioned a really good point, and that's reflection. So let's fast forward to the success that you're having now. Do you reflect quite a bit in regards to your coaching practice, with not just with yourself, but also your staff and your team around you?
Yeah, it's hard to know. What's kind of wonderful about this industry is that because it's so competitive, it's difficult to sort of compare yourself across a league. So what I try to do is give myself as many opportunities as possible to find comparisons across codes, across leagues, across the world, to help me orient myself and calibrate my thoughts and where I think our program is, and what my role is within that program, and what it could be. And so I think some of the best reflection I've done, the most valuable reflection, has been through the conversations I've had with many Australian coaches and sports scientists and education specialists, as well as a litany of exceptionally bright folks that I worked with and that we had the pleasure of hosting when I worked for the NBA teams that I did in Philly and Brooklyn. You had quite a few folks that wanted to come visit us for personal development, or perhaps to link up with a colleague. And pretty quickly, I recognized that was a insane advantage for me to have a chance to get to know those folks and develop relationships with them and pick their brains as they came through our doors. And so countless relationships started that way. And in the intervening years, I think that has been the most fruitful source of reflection for me, talking to folks that I think, I read somewhere that so much of innovation is translation. And I think that that's certainly true, because we're all trying to solve the same problems, and many of these problems have been solved already and better than whatever my idea might be. And so, or the idea of our coaching staff. So that's something I do as frequently as I can. And I think this long off season, actually probably the best thing that's come from it has been the chance to set up some recurring meetings where I'm getting the chance to learn from some of the best NRL, AFL, cricket, skill acquisition, basketball coaches for sure, that are in my network.
Yeah, you have a few staff members there at the Sydney Kings that I obviously know quite well. And one of the things that sticks out to me, Will, is they constantly say your ability to network and learn from other people. I tell students here all the time that once you're in the industry, that the professional development is so important, and networking with as many people. I can't help myself. I do have to ask this question because you did mention it. You've met many Australian coaches, and we're certainly not going to name any, but how do they compare to the States? What's the biggest difference amongst the two sets of coaches, Will?
I'm hugely biased here. It's part of why I moved here, and it's connected to the ideas of like why I want my son to grow up here, and um, the way sport. I think there's obviously it's multifactorial. There's tons of inputs, but some of them are, I think, sports science's early foothold here. You know, the AIS obviously as a global leader in sport performance and the way that's driven Olympic sport, but really sport across the board here in this country, a relatively small country in terms of population, and yet punching above its weight across so many sports. My involvement with the national team obviously gave me unique insight into that and what that sort of superstructure looks like. It's no surprise that the NBA has invested millions of dollars in the Center of Excellence basketball program and headquartered their main academy in Canberra as a result of the hard work that Adam Caporn and Marty Clark and those guys have put into making that industry best. I think the idea of mateship is material. The idea that from a young age, Australians are culturalized to understand that it's not just being someone's buddy, but that it's pulling somebody's head in that you care about, or jumping over a bar if a bar needs to be jumped over, and sort of everything in between is what really team sport is writ small. So I think that's hugely influential. And I also think that the physical distance of Australia has created two really unique opportunities, which is that they have to make a lot of effort to study outside their shores. And so of the guests we'd have in my old MBA life, it was littered with Australians, and we would have had a quarter of the AFL coaching staffs, performance staffs come through our doors at one of those teams at some stage or another. Tons of NRL guests. The need to do it, and in some ways, puts more energy behind, and creates a sort of virtuous cycle for these coaches to reap the benefits of doing their own cross-code studies. And it's no surprise, when you look at those factors combined, why so many Australians work in EPL, at the highest levels of cricket, all across the US major sports leagues, including the NBA. And then I think the last one is just from the time that they're young, that time you spend together touring outside the country has real advantages. And the time that they spend together in those touring groups across many different sorts of sports shines a light and augments really the fun of team sports. It kind of wraps up something like summer camp in the US and your travel sport team and the kind of close-knit gap year sort of experiences you get from traveling outside your area of comfort. I think all of those factors goes into it, but you won't find a bigger cheerleader for Australian coaching than me. And it's because I learned so much from it and have so much admiration for it.
Well, I think, Will, you just gave me the promotion for this interview right there. That's a huge endorsement for Australian coaches. And myself, Will, being able to travel, I know exactly what you're saying, being able to travel with teams and spending so much time away, it's amazing. It is just so exciting for a young kid, and it really is something special. What I'd like to touch on now, if it's okay, is a bit of a buzzword. The whole coach-athlete relationship and culture and all that mixed into one. Everyone has their own opinion on how this should work. Coach-athlete relationship. Firstly, can I just get your general thoughts on what exactly you think that is and why it's important?
I think that there's sort of two main building blocks that I try not to lose sight of, and I try to evangelize to our other staff members. And the first is just authenticity, the degree to which you can be yourself and that you are comfortable sharing what you can, and you're not trying to share more than you can give. You're not pretending to be an expert in some sort of rebounding technique. You're just making it up on the fly. You're not trying to show them how to deadlift if you've never spent a day in the weight room. But I think for so many years, coaching was cast as a certain type of role, and there was a need to fill that tyrant, despot kind of leader of others, and gather around me the font of knowledge while I share with you how this is done. And so fighting that actively is really important to me, because it drives performance. I think that that's a house of cards, and I think that you just see diminishing numbers of those across the world, and it's because it's a really hard role to play. So that's, I think, the first is being yourself and understanding what it is you have to give, being objective in what your role is as it relates to the athlete, and being upfront with them. The other piece of it, I think, that I'll constantly come back to is they want to know, like, if they think you can help them, they'll listen. And so the barriers to you helping them are knowing what you're talking about, which means you got to study and prepare and think deeply and, do all sort of the obvious things, I suppose, it seems like. But I think you also need to try to understand where your incentives might not line up perfectly with theirs, and help get on the front foot in showing them why they can trust you, at least in certain areas. And in pro sport in particular, the salaries and the years of contracts and the team options and the agent's influence and the comparison between them and their teammates. There's so many forces, not to mention their friends and family and partners texting them when they get on the bus. I once heard a coach talk about how there's only one happy person anytime you get on the bus after a game, win or lose, and it's probably the leading scorer. And every other player on the bus is receiving text messages talking about coach is not using you right. Your teammate is screwing things up for you. The place you're playing, the school, the program, whatever it is was the wrong decision. And so if you aren't, that's probably a little extreme, but it's not crazy. Like, I think it's more that way than not. And that's just human nature. And so communicating with your athletes and with your staff, making them aware of that dynamic, and making the athletes know you're aware of that dynamic, and then trying to help them choose you. Look, there might be a time where you get waived, or in the NBA traded, or we don't choose not to resign you, or, maybe my boss asks me whether you're doing what you're the player of our future or not. I'm going to answer honestly, and maybe in one of those moments, our incentives won't be aligned because I'm going to tell the truth. But it's also the case that I could get fired tomorrow, or, they could bring somebody else better than me in and demote me, or, just cancel my visa. Like, all number of crazy things could happen in pro sport. So we aren't that dissimilar, in that respect. And in the meantime, like, the better you play, the better I look, the better chance my family gets to stay near Bondi Beach, and the more likelihood that we have a lot of success together as a team. And I'm going to be obsessing over trying to make you look good and help you improve so that you can look good, and choose structures and choose people that support you in that pursuit. And so those two dynamics, I think the interplay between them, if they believe you and they have good reason to believe you, then you can get to the hard work of actually trying to help them grow and help them be successful.
I think, Will, I think that's a great answer. I really do. And can I just say that what an experience you have at the moment, coaching, obviously a head coach here in this country near Bondi Beach. That's pretty good for family as well. I'm sure you're enjoying that.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That is exciting. And can I ask, where does the honesty come from in Will Weaver? Where has that come from in being honest with athletes and being quite humble, I guess, if that's what we want to call it?
I don't think of it as coming from anywhere except for it's important. I think there are many pressures that can make someone choose not to be uh, forthright, and trying to be aware of those pressures so that you can set up systems that combat them. But also recognizing when you do say something that's slightly less than true, you might just bend something, even with your spouse or your mom or your boss or your colleague or whatever it is. There's moments where you say, like, I don't think I believe that. Like, that just was something I said because I had to say something, or it was filling a silence, or I got scared hearing colleagues in my college coaching life that were able to say many, many things that I didn't think they believed throughout their day. And having people that can help you recognize that is obviously beneficial. I'm lucky to have Luke Longley on our staff that takes a special interest in knocking me down a peg, which is by design and something that he doesn't get paid enough to do, but I think he enjoys quite a bit. And I surely benefit from his from a wide range of amazing traits that he possesses. But as with all this stuff, I just think it works. And so the pragmatist in me says, do it more. And as you get benefits from it and you see results, and so you want to do more of it. And I think one of those results is that it models behavior the other direction. And you might have more back and forths with players when you really ask them what they think and they think they can tell you. But I'm a big believer that you want to know, you want to know whether or not you're going to need a divorce attorney before you do. And if you wait until somebody just serves you the papers, something in the system was deleterious to the success of your union. So trying to create systems that allow you to get a head start on that process and de-escalate whatever is going on between that player and his agent, or that player and another team, or that player and a teammate. It's like all those things are helpful, even if they're painful.
Yeah, definitely. And it's certainly an interesting one, but I love the way that you look at that, Will. What I'd like to do very quickly, and just for the last couple of minutes here, if that's okay, I'd like to flip it. And I've got a lot of undergrad students that will listen to this content and will want to hear from the head coach of the Sydney Kings. What's some advice that you might have for the young strength and conditioning coach, etc., that is looking to get into the industry? What's some attributes or a little bit of advice that Will Weaver might be able to give them?
I think do it. Like whatever it is, whatever it for you is the thing that you're trying to do. Not only can you try to learn through doing, but you will get exposed to maybe tangentially related things that we weren't even aware existed, that then provide you the chance to pivot, or that reinforce how confident you are and fill you with even more desire to pursue it. Not enough emphasis put on trying to deepen the relationships you have by thinking about it through the lens of, if that person called and asked me this question, this favor, would I be excited to respond or not? That set of people are imagining what could benefit them, and anything that's on the Venn diagram interesting to you and helpful to someone else, I think you should be doing it and writing about it and sharing it with others, in hopes that someone will tell you, this part of this sucked and this part of this was amazing, and I've never thought about it through that perspective. Would you consider coming and joining this conference, or observing our team? Those to me are hard. Those organic things that come out of those processes are hard to quantify in advance, but they certainly are, I think, where I found the richest learnings. I also think that you're looking for troves of value. And so sometimes that's an individual person. I text most nights before I go to bed and most mornings when I wake up with an ex-colleague of mine that now writes about basketball, but he and I trade messages about the games that are about to take place the next morning for me and that evening for him. And we talk about education and game theory and all sorts of stuff that really sharpen my thinking about it and hopefully benefit him as well. And so sometimes they come from those individual relationships. Other times they come from, there's a whole set of DVDs made in the 90s and 2000s about where they just film great basketball practices and basketball clinics, and many of those are available on YouTube and online. And so if you find that, it's like, well, so hold on, I can watch this at time and a half and absorb a great deal of context for some of what the best basketball coaches on the planet thought at that time. That's super helpful. And then I think lastly is just so much of any industry is decision making, that educating yourself on cognitive bias and trying to understand the mental models that govern your life and your profession, and trying to become better at being a person that can seek and cultivate the data they need to make the kinds of choices that they're going to have to make, whether it's renting a house or picking a spouse or treating a player's ankle injury. Like that process in and of itself, exclude the content, the ability to sort through that and choose thoughtfully is, I think, worth its weight in gold. And every great practitioner has some level of that ability, whether or not it was formally trained. But I think the more education on that front, the better. And I'm speaking to myself as much as I am to any of your students. But those are the areas that I find myself really feeling like I get something out of routinely.
Will, I absolutely love the idea that you're willing to upskill and pick knowledge from multiple different areas in anything. If you get a little sniff of anything that could potentially help you in your work, then if that makes you better at what you do, but more importantly, if that helps your athletes, right? So I think that is wonderful advice to pass on to students. Will, I have pinched 20 to 25 minutes or so of your time, and I'm very grateful for it. You have obviously returned home for the day, and I'm sure that you've got busy practice again tomorrow. So I do thank you. There's a lot of information there that I know that not only the wider sporting community, but also students will benefit from. We obviously, it's uncertain times at the moment, right? And we don't know what exactly will happen with sport over the next couple of months and the season ahead and all that sort of stuff. But whatever happens for you, wish you the very best of luck. I'm sure that you enjoy what you do. I can see from talking to you today your passion and your desire around what you do. So regardless what happens, there's no doubt that you're going to have a smile on your face and you're going to be enjoying it, right?
Well, thanks so much. It's in no small part due to the chance to talk to other people that care a lot about what they do. And I'm so appreciative to be a part of the sporting community here in Sydney and Australia more broadly. And I look forward to having even more involvements with you and your program and your students.
I really appreciate it, Will. Thank you for your time, and let's look to potentially speak again at season's end. And whatever happens for you going forward in your coaching career, having spoken with you today, I know that you're going to be extremely successful. So good luck with it all, and thank you.